Hi, welcome again to Videos from the Ville. I'm Professor Charles Greenawalt, and this is Introduction to City Planning. Well, we've just taken a look at definition of the cities and some history of the cities. We want to move on just for a second and take a look at Arnold Toynbee's thinking on cities. Arnold Toynbee is, of course, one of the major historians of the human condition and of human existence. We find that Arnold Toynbee is one of the individuals who's attempted to leave us a written history of man's complete existence. You find that this goes along with the I'm forgetting their names now. That'll come to me then. Another wonderful account of world history that was left to us. The interesting thing about Arnold Toynbee is he's a great believer in the great man theory and believes that it is significant and significant individuals who will push history forward rather than being just vague social and economic forces. But Arnold Toynbee has a few thoughts that are useful to us when we look at the city. He gives us poses the question for us: has man's metropolitan environment any precedence? Has man's metropolitan environment any precedence? As he does his study. Of course, the other study was done by Will and Ariel Durant. Will and Ariel Durant worked on their 11-volume history of mankind for over 40 years until their death. And they were, I think, both believers in the great man theory and in the social and economic forces, but Toynbee always held fast for the great man theory. But has man's metropolitan environment any precedence? You find that Toynbee believes that man's metropolitan environment has two characteristics. When we look at man's metropolitan environment, we have to acknowledge that it's an expanding environment. And as it expands, we have to be concerned about whether or not it's expanding out of proportion to our locomotion abilities. Is it expanding so much and so fast that we won't be able to walk it? Certainly that was in my mind the first time I ever visited London. In London we walked and walked. We thought we were going to walk everywhere. We soon came to become strong supporters of the underground, and that it was much better to take the subway from point A to point B. This would save us hours and hours. You find that as the city expands, and if it expands out of proportion to our locomotion abilities, there are consequences, according to Toynbee. And the consequences is that the city becomes a prison. The city becomes a prison for us unless we can escape it. Unless we're able to walk out of the city will become a prison for us. And secondly, he tells us, as lots of individuals seek to escape the city and to settle along the periphery of the city, you find they then become responsible for transforming the countryside into the city. They transform the countryside, they annex it to the city, and it becomes part of the city as well. Part of the city that they were seeking to escape as they moved to the very edge of the human settlement pattern. Toynbee believed that this widespread annexation of land for the cities was relatively a new feature to man's history. But Toynbee believed that the city and the countryside were complementary. He believed that the city and the countryside were complementary. And he tells us very, very strongly, very clearly, that if we continue to annex the hinterlands, the areas around the cities, that man will become more and more violent. Man will become more and more, I should say, less human. Because if we cannot escape the city for even bits and pieces of time, we're forced to live a completely urban life. And he believes, when we look at the span of world history, that man is not intended to live a completely urban life. That's why the city and the countryside are complementary. And in a balanced human existence, we need both to live in and to sample the countryside and the city. So man cannot live a completely urban life. And these are his thoughts on what the city, how it should be defined, and how it has developed. So